Thank you for having me here. I haven't presented in front of the public since before COVID. I've been in some of the murder mystery fundraisers around town, but I haven't gotten up and spoken. And I realized the other day that I was going to be rather rusty. And when I got here, a lot of my visual stuff wouldn't mount on this computer. And so thanks to Tara, we frantically threw a bunch together. And so this is probably going to be somewhat rough. I hope you forgive me, and to cover my struggles, I brought gifts. So I hope everybody will go ahead and put your name in. I've got stickers, I've got bookmarks, I've got some of the t-shirts I've designed in the past, and mugs and cards. And what you're looking at here in front of me is a great big blanket that a friend made of a lot of the t-shirts I've designed. And you might notice some of those have books mentioned and animals mentioned. And as I said, I'm probably going to be a little bit rough today, but my New Year's resolution this year was to lower my standards for myself. And so I think in keeping with that, I'm just going to keep plowing on forward and just visit with you a lot. Uh, One thing I wanted to share inspired me a few weeks ago. I read about the differences between the Neanderthal brain and modern man's brain, and their brain shapes are very different. Neanderthals are really oblong, and ours are fairly rounded. And a lot of that has to do with this frontal lobe we've got going. And it's believed right now, I mean, it's going to be hard to prove because I don't know any Neanderthals unless we talk about elected officials. But the other, in general, the thing that separates us the most is our love of story. Now, my two biggest weaknesses, and I end up exploited all the time, which is why I'm trying to lower my standards, have to do with a really good story or a vulnerable population. So I get hooked into a good story anytime. I'm buying into it. If it's well told, it can be pretty drab and I'm just hooked. But if it's a vulnerable population, you think of children, animals, older people. And that's where I can't say no. Don't tell anybody, please. Okay. But I started looking too about stories and compared notes with a friend the other day. She was talking about playing dress up as a little girl. And I said, "Oh, I played dress up all the time." And I said, "What did you do to pretend? What were you?" And she said, "Oh, well, my mother would let me wear her hat and her hats and her gloves and some of her jewelry and her high heels. And I would play church lady." And I looked at her, I said, "Really?" And she said, "Oh, yeah." And then I'd have bridge party and I'd set my dolls up around a table and we would pretend to be drinking coffee and playing bridge. "What did you do?" And at this point, I kind of got a little bit uncomfortable because, I'm at the age of 5 or so. My joy in dressing up was to take all my mother's scarves and wrap them onto my head and as a sarong, and to play my mother's records, which my favorite was the voice of the Extabe, Ima Sumek, who was a Peruvian singer, had covered 4 octaves and had this real jungle sound to it. And I would be a jungle princess and I would dance around and save my village from my incredible dancing skills with my mother's scarves. So I had a slightly different take on what pretend would be because I was a jungle lover. I mean, perhaps South America and the other jungle we know in Africa are different, but when you're 5 years old, a jungle is a jungle, right? Okay. The other thing I did every Saturday morning is I would wake up and couldn't wait because jungle theater would be on television and I could watch for Tarzan. I was a Tarzan nut. I watched any chance I could, especially if it was Johnny Weissmuller. And for my 8th birthday, I was a pretty good reader. And I'll bet most of the people in this room are pretty good readers. I mean, look where we are. And as a big reader, I had teachers in my family who would encourage those skills. And my mom deemed me good enough to receive this for my 8th birthday, Tarzan of the Apes, the original by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And at the back of the book is the ape English dictionary that Tarzan was able to translate, I'm sure, to Edgar Rice Burroughs, knowing that Tantor was an elephant. Well, I'd always wanted to be friends with a chimpanzee, to ride an elephant, to feed giraffes from the trees. I mean, those were my kid fantasies. Fast forward several years, I'm a student at the University of Tulsa. Mary Chernovitz, Dr. Chernovitz, offers students extra credit who will volunteer to teach the new baby chimpanzees at the zoo sign language. There's me. This is me. So I'm trained in just a few rudimentary words of sign language, and I am in the room with a baby chimp. His name was Buddy, and he was a cantankerous, mean little soul. Several other people had volunteered, and one by one, Buddy chomped them hard enough that they quit. But he worked with me a little bit longer until our last day together, when he made the signal for pick me up, and I did, but he wrapped his arms around my neck and sunk his teeth into my jaw. And I managed to shove my thumb between his teeth just enough that he wasn't able to rip about this much of this flesh on my face off. And I was done with Buddy, who went on to become the dominant daddy chimp of the Tulsa Zoo. I mean, and he didn't never liked women either. Maybe he had girlfriends with chimps, but as far as females, he was very, very aggressive. So time goes on, and I am into the world of art. I'm doing portraits and doing children's book illustrations, and something comes up. I hear thumping sounds in the walls between the bedroom and bathroom. And I realize that a mother bird must have built a nest up in my attic. And I have a choice. I do nothing and let the babies die who have apparently tumbled down where they can't get out and mom can't get to them. Or I cut holes in the wall until I find them. So my new Home Depot card was like being used immediately because it took 4 holes before I was able to figure out what panel they were in, and I pulled them out. And this is a picture of me because I called my vet and said, I'm standing here holding baby birds. What do I do? And he said, congratulations, you're a mother. And I said, no, 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 no. I don't know. I don't know how to take care of baby birds. Well, he said, then they're going to die. And I bought it. He said, what do I do to save them? Dr. Paul Welch, and I'm thinking on him right now because he'll try to do this to you anytime you call too. But Paul said, come on out and I'll show you what to do with them. And he did. He started training me to rehabilitate wildlife and vulnerable population, interesting stories as to how animals function. I love science almost as much as I love art. And from there, I started rehabbing wildlife. And it started a rather wild life for me. I've taken in all sorts of critters over the years. I was state and federally licensed, worked with the game warden, the vet school, the zoo, and it became a real big part of my life. It's sort of a calling because it becomes 24/7 throughout spring and summer months. I worked with other people. We created Wing It, Wildlife in Need group in Tulsa, and some of these t-shirts reflect the t-shirts that I designed for fundraising. And that's how I got started making the toffee. We would have a fundraiser. I made 20 pounds once. I didn't know the rules and the laws and the health department, everything. But I did know that in 15 minutes, all 20 pounds were sold. So the next year I made 40 pounds and they all sold. And people started stalking me. See, when are you making them this year? And I went in to create the Mostly Magic Kitchen, where I met with Mimi Tarash, who's the director for Women in Recovery. And she said that I could use their kitchen on weekends because they didn't need the commercial kitchen then. And what would I call the company and everything, and if I donated back to them. So I'm donating to Women in Recovery and to Wing It, but spending weekends making toffee. And I talked to Mimi and said, well, all my friends call this toffee crack. And she said, no, we are not going to be saying Kim is making crack in the Women in Recovery kitchen. And I said, no, I fully understand that. And I don't particularly like the term. How about disappearing toffee? Best trick in the book. and you open it and put it out and it disappears every time. So that was the plan, and it's kind of taken off. And at this point, I'm working with another group to maybe take that over for me because it's a lot of backbreaking work to do that. At any rate, let me share a little bit with you on some of the slides. I rerouted my slides, and I'm waiting for this to come up. I punched the go button, and should I punch it again or just be patient? Oh, you're sharing. Am I on Zoom? Am I still on Zoom?
You're still on Zoom.
Okay.
They can see you, but they can't see your slides.
Okay. So, and I need to navigate the slides. Okay. One's up there. Now we need the next one.
Just gotta pick this up.
Okay. It's up there. It's up there.
Now
No, back up one. Okay. This is from my first book. One thing I love to do with my books is put people and objects and animals that I know in them. So this, I used my oldest daughter, Sophie, from pictures when she was little for white bead ceremony, darkened her hair a little bit, and I gave her her dog, Daisy. I'm a big one for, this was Daisy back then, way back then. I'm also a big one for research. My next book was Green Snake Ceremony, so I studied up on snakes. I don't know how to get rid of turn up the volume. And sorry, everybody watching on Zoom. I hope you see this.
Can't see that.
Oh. Yeah, there's not
That's
one
not
here.
her. That's not her screen. It is difficult to do that once we're in.
Do we have to start all over? There. That's helpful. Back. Okay. That is a snake. It is a ball python. Thank you, Paul Welch, again. He loaned it to me for a photo op to emphasize research for things like green snake ceremony. I had a lot of fun with this book. Herman Green Snake lived underneath the house, and the family is looking for him, the Shawnee family, in order to do a green snake ceremony. And so I went to town with all snake jokes I could make up. Like, if you're a snake, you might gargle with Listerine, polish up with coil of Olay, shampoo with Head and Shoulderless. Herman finds out they're looking for a green snake and does not want to get trapped or caught, so he studies all sorts of different books in order to change being a snake. Another animal that I took care of, that I actually had to my house, and I can't get these pictures to come up on these slides, is a buffalo. I did a book called The Buffalo in the Mall. And from there, it led me with all the rehabbing and the animals to meet a woman, Chrissy Perry Martin, also known as Mama Orphanage. Now, Chrissy was quite a character when I met her. She had so many stories to tell. She was back visiting Tulsa from where she had been rehabilitating wildlife herself. And she wanted to write a children's book. And she wanted to meet someone who might want to do the illustrations. So friends put us together, and 3 hours later, we decided that this is going to work, that we were going to be partners in this effort, especially since Chrissy wanted me to come where she had been rehabilitating wildlife for 40 years, and it was in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, I know that Nairobi is not exactly the Congo, it's not jungle, but to go to Africa had been a big dream of mine ever since I was small, especially after Chrissy told me how she had hand-raised cubs like these. So with that invitation, I said yes. And I do remember getting on the plane in London thinking, wow, I hope she's there when I get off. So I took a risk as well and stayed with her and her husband, Esmond, for about a month. That's where Chrissy showed me all her critters that she had raised for the animal orphanage there in Nairobi. This is Patrick and Patricia, friends of hers. She named all of the animals after her friends and family. And this is her posing with them. The first day I got there, she got a call on her phone where someone said, "There's an emergency at the airport. We have seized a black market shipment." And they popped open a large container that had been sitting on the tarmac for a couple of days in the African heat. And there were monkeys and baby chimps from the Congo locked inside. Some of the animals died. They rushed them to the animal orphanage. The vet was not in town that week. And Chrissy immediately grabbed my arm, lifted it up, and said, "Kim is a chimpanzee expert." And I was like, "No, no, not, don't do this." And she goes, "Kim knows everything about chimpanzees." And I was, "No, no, no." But she ushered me into the room, and there in the large cages were these baby chimps. Now, the black market means that people go in and kill the family of chimpanzees, cut them up and sell their hands for one thing, their heads for another. The babies watch. The babies are captured, caged, and shipped to some place like Egypt, which is where they were supposed to be going. These infants, they were 6 months to a year and a half old, cried when I walked in the room, seeing them on the other side of the cage. And it took me several hours of simply sitting and showing them how I would pet them if they would let me, and talk to them very slowly and reach out a hand with a treat and go very much at their speed. But after several hours, I made some friends. Now, I didn't include this in a lot of my school visits because it was so tragic. And they did recover, and they did get sent to a place very similar to what Jane Goodall did with the chimpanzees. There are several places like that, and this one was the closest. So every day while I was there, I would go and visit the baby chimps and work with them and get them to play and relax and set up enrichment and things like that. I am not a chimpanzee expert, but I've done a lot with 3-year-olds, so trust me, I knew what they would enjoy. I got the chance to see lots of things in Nairobi. One was the very popular giraffe manor, where you can stay at it's like an Airbnb, and you stay upstairs, and in the mornings, giraffes stick their head through your window to get a treat. They have a large structure there where you can go up to the second floor and buy pellets. And Chrissy showed me how to get kissed by a giraffe. She said, "Hold the pellet in your teeth and lean forward," and the giraffe would see it. Now, their heads are this big, their eyes are like here, and this enormous head swings into you. Their mouth opens, the tongue rolls out, and you puff the biscuit onto their tongue. And you time it just right, and you get this big, greasy kiss. But hey, you only live once, right? I can say I've been smooched by a giraffe and bitten by a chimp, right? So anyway, I got to do that. And we also visited Sheldrick's baby elephant and baby rhino rescue, where they have stalls where the baby elephants stay with 24-hour petting, touching, and keepers who were with them and even sleep next to them in the stall at night. Here's a baby rhino that they were taking care of. Daphne Sheldrick has since passed away, but she has made some huge changes in how people in Africa see elephants and the kinds of rescues that they do. So getting just to be near, watching the babies come thundering down the hill after they open their stalls, to where a lot of the keepers are waiting with 2-gallon sized bottles of milk, and they hoist them up like you see this young man here holding it. And I mean, they play, they suck on the keeper's fingers, middle 2 fingers, because they're still very oral and very dependent on a whole lot of attention. What? How old was that rhino? Probably about 2. He's about 2 or so. And back at Chrissy's house, she had her own wildlife that liked to visit. These are hyraxes that we put plates of carrots out for every day. We shopped, bought kikapus, which are the woven baskets you see all over. I got the chance to watch the Maasai perform, watch them herding their cattle, and visit the different markets, as well as see the matatus or the buses driving wildly all over, packed with people, and taking some incredible risks in traffic. The traffic there is dreadful. We stopped at the market, bought a whole lot of things for the animals. I did a school visit and talked to children as to how I see faces, how I draw and translate, like this young lady. I hope you can see it. Yeah, you can. Okay, good. We came to a stop, almost running into some baboons. They run freely all through Nairobi. So if you're standing in the front yard and a troop comes dashing past, you just stay real still. They may steal your bottle of Sprite, but that's a baboon for you. Stopped at the gates of the animal orphanage, and Chrissy said, "You simply must meet the girls." And I thought she meant some of the employees, but she pushes me into a large yard, and racing towards us at 70 miles an hour are the cheetahs that live there. And that is my hand, and I still have both. We fed the warthogs fresh grass. Everybody gets treats, everybody gets brushed, and everybody gets stuffed toys. Because when you are a tiny one brought in, orphaned by, terrible circumstances, anything to cuddle with is very helpful. The day came I said goodbye to Mama Orphanage, and I went home with an idea that was much like hers to do a children's book about the wildlife she knew, but importantly, too, to do a story about the woman I'd gotten to know in Nairobi who put animals first and foremost above everything. Now, Chrissy's name there is Mama Orphanage. She is an honorary game warden, and I shortened it to Mama O. So we start off with the cover, the book cover for On a Road in Africa. And everybody, every human you see in this is somebody I met in Nairobi. So I have tiny little portraits I'm doing like crazy. I have a cheetah on Chrissy's car. Patrick is driving with a new cub they've rescued on his back. And you see on the opening pages a rhino entering the screen, seeing a bag of pineapples. And those are what you're seeing first are my initial sketches and then the final illustrations of the book. And I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as I can because I know we need to have time for questions. And I will warn you, I'm doing the best I can. This is where things messed up on my slideshow, so I apologize. But it's On a Road in Africa. It became On a Road in Africa. And the hyraxes are watching as a kikapu or a basket is handed off to hands taking off in the front seat. Everybody waves, and Chrissy is leaving, but we don't know that's who it is. She goes through the traffic, and to the right, you'll see a red Jeep, and I put her husband Esmond in that Jeep with Patrick on his motorcycle leaving in the front. We pass the Maasai, where the children help all the time. We stop at the market, where you gather things for the animals. But there are more stops in front. Here are the scary matatus, and I made them look like animals, great big animals. Probably your biggest threat there in Nairobi is getting hit by a matatu. Stop at the soko or the market. And we stop off at the school, the Banda school, where the children contribute things also. You saw the baboons in an earlier slide. And here they are in the book. One thing actually happened while I was there, and it's Chrissy came to a sudden stop in order to rescue a Jackson's chameleon. I hung out with him for most of the day, watching his colors shift and change like chameleons do before sending him onwards. And here in the story, we arrive at the gate of the Nairobi Animal Orphanage. Now, I wrote this story in a chant. And one of the repeated phrases is, "Where you gonna go, Mama O, Mama O? Where you gonna go, Mama O?" So here it's Mwigai is feeding, oh no, that's Patrick, sorry, that's Patrick feeding the cheetahs. And the warthogs are getting brushed. And this is Muigai feeding the parrots and the monkeys. And one thing they do for enrichment is they stuff baskets full of dung and throw it out for the young lion cubs to play with. And they will spend days tearing it up and rolling in it. One reason it's an instinct to roll in buffalo dung, because then the scent of a predator is masked and the buffalo don't smell you coming. So nature has a route or a way for just about everything. At the end, Mama O, oh, let me say, I remember Mama O checks every pin, says goodnight, and tucks them in. And at the end of the evening, I ask, where are you going to go, Mama O, Mama O? Where are you going to go, Mama O? On a road in Africa, on a road to home. And that rhino ate every one of those pineapples. I said goodbye to Chrissy amid a few cheetah kisses. And as I told you, they like to name new orphans coming into the animal orphanage after someone. And about 3 or 4 months later, I was given an incredible compliment. This is Kimberly, a little lioness cub. And so I'm having to live up to that name all these years. Now, this is the book, On a Road in Africa. I brought a copy of it for everyone to see. And I brought some of my original illustrations as well. Folks will say, so Kim, what comes next? And if any of you see Tulsa Pets when you go to the vet or when you stop at Southern Ag or anything like that, I write for Tulsa Pets, and I usually write about wildlife. But I got inspired, and this one, I don't know if the Zoom's working, but this month is on goats by me, because I want to find out more about these interesting animals once I saw them all standing in trees in Morocco. I haven't been to Morocco yet, but that's my plan for this March. I have time for questions, and I can pull some names for whoever wins something. Do you want to give me any of the Zoom questions, or people raise their hands?
Do they intend to let these animals go at some point?
They will not let the big cats go because the big cats aren't afraid of people. Chrissy was friends with Joy and George Adamson, if you all remember Born Free. And she was friends with, she knew Diane Fossey. She knew, it'll come to me in a minute, the woman who flew across the Atlantic. Beryl, it'll come to me. Anyway, I mean, there are a whole lot of people who live in Nairobi and really love being there. But yeah, I went blank. You asked me a good question. I went blank.
Oh, about letting the animals.
Oh, letting the animals go. That's right. I was going to say, because I was thinking of the wild animals who were people there. But they would let a lot of them go in the Nairobi State Park. And if they would be good with that. Do I have any more questions? Yeah.
Reminded of while you were speaking, and it was called 14 Cows for America.
14 Cows for America. It sounds like a good trade. Mm-hmm.
Sympathized very much with us after 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
and they created a memorial park with a herd of cattle. And I wondered if you happened to go there also.
No, I didn't get the chance to see that. There's a lot to see and do. I mean, I did get to go on a safari, and I did get to see Meryl Streep actually stayed at Chrissy and Esmond's home while she was filming out of Africa. And the Kazuri bead factory as a wonderful, there are so many amazing stories that happened there. And I'm really sorry that I don't have my the slideshow that I had wanted to share with you. But any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Right here, those of us that may have time now, retired, but wing it, I bet is always looking for volunteers.
You know, this is a wonderful point. Wing It is a loosely gathered group of wildlife rehabilitators. And the main point is to help educate wildlife rehabbers who want to do it in their home, to guide them, and to help them afford the food, because it actually got started when I realized that this one couple would take in raptors, and it's about $10 a day to feed a baby great horned owl, because you're feeding them frozen mice and rats, and you have to skin and cut them up when the raptors are young. So, but this couple was doing it at $10 a day, and they were kind of the leading experts in accepting the animals. And they called and said, we're kind of scared because we're up to 11 baby owls this season, which is going to be about a $10,000 cost to raise them before you can release them. And I realize there are lots of people out there who would like to do hands-on wildlife rehabbing and learn it, but the expense is really high, or can be, depending on what you take in. So we started Wing It in order to continue to fund that wish for people. And we've got some folks who are disabled, and there are some folks who will pick up animals and drop them off at someone's home for them. And we try to order plenty of the right kind of formula for the baby raccoons. That's another story. I've raised raccoons and flying squirrels and box squirrels and gray squirrels and bunnies and possums. I've had gophers and let me think a minute, groundhogs and armadillos, and I mean but mostly I was a bird person. And I've had baby roadrunners, and I've had young Mississippi kites and kestrels and blue jays and crows. Crows are my favorite. So, but if anybody is interested, Wing It can be found easily on Facebook or through the Tulsa Audubon site. If somebody would like to learn and have critters around. And what's fun is you can release the bunnies or the possums in your yard. Possums are good too. They're good to have. They don't tear anything up, they don't make noise, and they eat ticks. So